Now, if you've never done it before, come here on a Wednesday night and just wander the halls. Just walk around and see what you can see. If you come on a Wednesday night when we have a high-def praise service especially, then you'll get the full experience. You can just wander through the church and look through the glass doors into Emerson Hall, and you'll see an elderly Chinese man teaching Tai Chi to whoever comes, teaching this subtle form of energy and spirit that was passed down to him by his father, who was a master of Tai Chi in China. Or if you go upstairs into the gallery, you'll see Victor Perichin and a whole bunch of people with their shoes off, meditating, learning the art of meditation, of sitting still and listening. Something that we often have a hard time doing unless we have earbuds in, from our iPod or something. And then if you wander downstairs and you go to the president's room and you just crack the door open a little bit, you don't know what you'll see. People in all kinds of different positions as they're doing yoga, an ancient art from India, and learning to stretch not only their bodies but their hearts and their souls as they do it. And then if you make your way over to the chapel, before you even get close to opening the door, you're going to hear something. You're going to hear some drums from Gabriel. You can probably hear some clapping. You might hear some shouting. You'll definitely hear some hallelujahs. And if you come at just the right moment, you might even hear some people speaking in tongues. But I wouldn't want you to stop there, because if you make your way to the library, you might find a group of folks who knit prayer shawls for people in our congregation who are in the hospital who are dying. And the idea there is that they put, with each stitch, they say a prayer. And then the care team gives those to people who wear them, and their families keep them sometimes for a long time after their loved one is gone. Now, do you know anywhere on earth where you can see all these things happening in the same place at the same time among people from the same community in the spirit of love? I don't know any other place. And I didn't even mention how there are occasional classes, a one-time or a two-time class on all kinds of subjects and traditions. One of my favorites was a class that has happened a few different times where they taught about the tradition of prayer beads in different religions, from Buddhism to Catholicism. So interesting how different places in different parts of the world found similar ways and different ways to lift up the spirit. Some people are loud with it, and some people quiet, and some people still, and some people standing on their head, But everybody trying to find that still point and that still place in their own heart that connects them to everybody else and everything else that exists. Now, you might ask yourself, what's the point of all this? Isn't All Souls known for being a church that's about service to the community? Isn't it a church that's about an intellectual approach to religion and a rational way of being in the world? So I'm going to answer that question today. And here's why. Because partly, it's really important to realize that there is a deep and significant connection between spirituality and justice making. And intelligent religion is religion that helps to bring those things together in our lives and in our world. But first, let me explain that we are in the midst of a sermon series. This is the second in a 5-part sermon series called the Fivefold Path to a Justice-Driven Life. If you were here last week, Tamara kicked us off with a fantastic sermon about commitment, because that's where it begins, committing to something beyond yourself in this world. Making that commitment. And then today's spirituality, and I'm going to go more into that in just a moment, and then we'll go on next week where our student minister, Randy Lewis, and I are working on something together that's going to help lift up the heritage, the life and the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. on that weekend when we celebrate him and all those who helped change our world. And not only on Monday can you come, and I hope you will, and march with our parade float. We're going to have the chorale, and you'll be there playing, and Gabriel. So last year, didn't the float, it got like second place or third place, all right, in the whole parade so we're going for first place this year, of course, but good job, Kate Starr and our youth group who lead us, Kate Starr and the youth group who lead us in that effort. And we want to also, but on Sunday, that's not all, because on Sunday night at Boston Avenue United Methodist Church, they also have the annual citywide Martin Luther King service and celebration, and this year they've asked our choirs to provide the music for the whole service. So a bunch of our choirs combined will be singing together under David Smith and Rick Fortner to celebrate his legacy with our whole city. So you're going to want to come out to that as well on next Sunday night. And then we move on, and so the theme, that third theme, is about diversity and inclusion and intercultural competency, because you can't have justice if you don't understand about difference. And then we're going to move on to the topic of money. And on January 22nd, I'm going to preach a sermon on your money or your life. Because our relationship with money is all messed up. It truly is. It truly is. And then on the fifth Sunday, as you heard, we have a special guest coming. She's a colleague of ours, but she's also a professor at Dartmouth College, and she's a creative writing professor. She's a poet, and she's going to be here, and she's going to help us lift up the third theme, which is creativity, because to change the world takes a lot of creativity in the arts and all kinds of new ideas and new thinking. And not only is she creative, but Nancy Crumbine is her name, Reverend Nancy Crumbine. She is hilarious. So you're not going to want to miss the last Sunday of the month. And if you look on your orders of service, you'll see we've got a sort of a checklist of all 5 of these different folds, if you will, on the path to a justice-driven life. And I want you to take this seriously. We're asking you to take this seriously and join with us on a journey in 2012 as we make this a year where we make a difference, a profound difference for good in this community and in the wider world. And we could do that together if we get on this 5-fold path together. So we hope that you'll fill out the blanks in that order of service, or go online and get a copy and fill it out. And we, at the end of the sermon today and each Sunday during this month, we're going to have a period of music where you can reflect and respond to the sermon by writing down your commitments. Keep it for yourself, but even better, hand it in the glass vase, which is right out in the foyer, and we'll keep this information, and our staff and our ministers will work with you in order for all of us to work together to move towards our commitments and our goals for 2012. It's going to be, I think, a really, really spectacular year here at All Souls, and I hope in your life as well. So we're inviting you on to the 5-fold path with us this year. So why do we want to make a difference? Why do we want to make a difference? Because unless we do, Oklahoma will continue to be the women imprisoning capital of the world. Right? We imprison and incarcerate more women in Oklahoma than anywhere else in the world. Iran, Saudi Arabia, you name it. No, this is the place. This is the epicenter of incarcerating women in the world. And we also, the impact on the children of those women, on our community, and the legacy that leaves for generations to come is unbelievable and pronounced. So there's a lot of work to do, and that's why we want to make a difference and be a part of making a difference in Oklahoma. Also, when you ask what's the link between justice and spirituality, I mean, first of all, the thing is that our justice system has become soulless. Right? It lacks wisdom. You think about how we lock up so many people for drug addiction, and we lock up so many people who are mentally ill. What is going on? We need to combine these traditions of justice and soulfulness and spirituality and ancient wisdom in order to get right with this. Prisons used to be called penitentiaries. They were a place for penitents to do repentance and to get their lives on track in a new way. But we've lost that. Now we put 16-year-olds in prison for life. And we lock up people for all kinds of nonviolent crimes and crimes to themselves. And I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that we've put a profit margin by privatizing the prisons in this state. Now, why should we make a difference? Because Oklahoma has some of the highest rates of disease and premature death in the nation. We are on the worst list of rankings around the nation on issues of illiteracy and addiction and hunger and abuse and you name it. There are categories in which we score like many undeveloped nations. We're becoming an embarrassment to the nation of the United States, always ranking 49, 50, 47 on so many different. So why make a difference? Because we can make a difference. And Oklahoma needs us to make a difference and to step up. We have families sleeping in cars, people living in cardboard boxes. We have politicians running on slogans of family values. Well, all this is going on. It's not just local. Because if you think about it, we're starting to see nuclear proliferation in the Middle East and in Asia. So pretty soon, there's the possibility that the cities of the world, there's already the possibility that the cities of the world could someday just be made up of sunshine, shining onto empty space and rubble. And environmental devastation, which is just around the corner. That's another spiritual sickness, a spiritual disease. It's a disconnection from the earth. Somebody said that humanity is becoming a cancer on this planet. Think about that. Cancer, what's cancer? It's cells of the body that start to grow out of control, and they no longer help to support the body. They then start to destroy the body. What's humanity on this God-green earth? We're growing out of control and starting to pollute and destroy the body of Mother Nature. Like a cancer on the body of the earth. What's going on? So you guys, everybody's going, wow, man, we came to church again. It's a new year. Marlin's all mad and angry. This is not what we were expecting, right? But William James was right decades ago when he said, we need to discover the moral equivalent to war, right? Something that will speak to people as universally as war does, and yet will be compatible with our spiritual lives, as war has proved to be incompatible. Right? It's incompatible with our spiritual lives to live without participating somehow in the unfolding of freedom and fairness and goodness in the world. We spend so much of our lives tranquilizing ourselves with trivia and lulling ourselves with daily routines, as William Sloane Coffin puts it, that we can become numb. We do become numb. I read the newspaper every day. I'm like flipping through the pages. I'm reading about the stuff that just ripped my heart out. And yet I just flip through. Every once in a while a story catches me and just hits me and I break down. But so often it's just numb to what's going on. Now let's be honest, it's hard to listen and to face these kinds of realities. It's hard to hear me up here talking about them, right? Beginning of a new year, kind of came to church, thought you might start a new tradition of coming to church and hear it. It's like, wow, if this is what it's going to be like, I might decide to stay home. People, they've already clicked me off on the live stream, I'm sure. They're Googling, they're on Amazon at this point, but that's all right. Some people prefer to live their lives like Uncle Murray in the play 1,000 Clowns, right? There are people he said, there are people who spill things and people who get spilled on in this world, and I choose not to notice the stains. He goes on, I have a wife, and I have children, and I have a business, and I'm not an exceptional man. So it's possible for me to just stay with things the way they are. I'm lucky, I'm gifted, I'm at peace, and I'm not apologizing for that. You see, in an unjust world, resignation to injustice is the subtlest form of injustice. And yet, many of us feel stuck between living lives that make us happy and doing the right thing. And yet, all of the ancient traditions and all of the ancient wisdom tells us that the source of true happiness is found by doing the right things. And yet, these days we find people practicing spiritual traditions and practices not so much for awareness as for escape. Right? You know the type of person, the one who saunters around with the yoga mat flung over one shoulder and telling their friends that the world is perfect just the way it is, that everything happens just as it's supposed to, and that it's all according to a cosmic plan, and that the goal of spirituality and the goal of life is to find peace and happiness and calm in the way life is. But who are they kidding? Who are they kidding when there are 6 and 7-year-old children in El Salvador who are sniffing glue on the streets because they don't have families to take care of them, and they know that sniffing glue not only gets them high, but it also suppresses their hunger. And that all the time in El Salvador, you have people going around and they shoot these kids because they're considered like rats on the streets. And I don't know if you heard on the radio, I was listening to NPR yesterday, and they did this expose about the factory in China where they make parts of the iPhone, and they said that they had all these people come out and got corroborating evidence that what they're doing at this factory where they make the parts for the iPhones that we have, they have workers, children. They found 5 kids under 12, and they found adults as well. But what they do is they make them work for 16 hours a day, just putting these little parts into these phones, and they work for 16 hours. They live in a dormitory, and they work them until their hands can no longer work. And then they let them go, and they have a lifelong disability and chronic pain and can barely do work. And leave the world the way it is, rise above it? Or the babies being born in broom closets in East LA because there's not enough room in the community hospitals? There are people who are using spiritual practice to escape like an addiction, to transcendence, to get above the world. These people are not only learning to be calm, they're learning to be aloof. And as Martin Luther King says, that they are finding ways to become adjusted to a male-adjusted world. And that is a tragic misunderstanding of religion and these ancient traditions and the purpose of our lives. And yet, there's another side to this too, right? There are whole groups of people and organizations who are working to bend the world towards justice. And yet, we can often see in this activism people who don't temper that with any kind of spiritual discipline or practice, and they burn out really fast because it is hard work to face these things day in and day out and try to make a difference. And they become angry, and they become sad, and they become arrogant a lot of times. If it's not coming from a place of love, not coming from a place of spirit, it's usually coming from a place of self-righteousness and anger. And that's why people burn out, and that's why they're so unfriendly. I mean, have you ever been a part of a peace organization? Because that's sometimes the biggest fighting and arguments that I've ever seen. Back at the time of the Gulf War, the Second Gulf War, and it was unbelievable. But when we balance these two together, then we can find ways the spiritual traditions help us to find ways to transfigure, to change our anger into love, agape love, the love of God. You know, they both can do good things on their own, but together, it's like the keys on a piano. You know, you've got ebony and ivory. You can make great music with just the black keys or just the white keys, but when you put them together, you can change the world. And when you put spirituality and activism together, it's unbelievable what kind of difference you can make. And we've got lots of examples. We've got, Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Dorothy Day and Howard Thurman and Bishop Desmond Tutu and Rigoberta Menchú and so many others. There's a fantastic book about this, about all these people's lives, that actually it's a meditation. You read about their lives, and then there's ways to reflect on your own life. Very powerful. It's written by a woman who attends our church all the time, Janet Parichin. It's called Engaged Spirituality. And I suggest you get it. And if it's sold out in the bookstore, we're going to get some more copies because it's a really beautiful book. It's inspiring. These are the kinds of lives. These are the kinds of people who we should be following. And yet, we live in a society that pays more attention to Lindsay Lohan's navel than to hungry children. Right? And so we end up tranquilized by trivia, and we need ways to just slow down and tune in and pay attention to what's important so we don't gain the whole world but lose our souls. And so I want you to, when you leave here today, I want you to understand how spirituality and spiritual practices can be a critical part of justice making and change. You know, spiritual practices, they can help us cool down when we get too hot. And they can help us heat up when we get too cold, right? When the unrest and the disappointment and the frustration is just too high, we can find some peace through spiritual practice. And when our peace becomes passivity, spiritual practice can put a fire under us again to get out there and to make a difference. And when we look at it, one of the reasons why these two things come together so beautifully is because the work to make change and justice in the world is the child of our broken heart. Right? You know, I know for me, the devotion that I have to inclusion and bringing people together and creating communities of acceptance for all people, everyone, as Dorothy says, is because, you know, I can remember as a child myself being in some very difficult times, especially as a teenager, and feeling being excluded and being considered sort of second class and looked down upon, and just how painful that is. I still, when I see people being treated that way or read a book or see a movie, I start to tear up, and I get really angry if I see it in my own life. And so what spiritual practice through prayer, through singing, through meditation and other practices has helped me to transmute that anger and that sadness into something life-giving, into love. It's like a spiritual alchemy, right? It's like that fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin, where the daughter is trapped in a room full of straw and she learns how to turn the straw into gold. Right? Spiritual practices help us to turn our anger into love. Now that's something that is contagious in the world. When there are activists out there making change in the world and they're coming from a place of love of all people, and love is in their heart, and that's what you see in their faces, that is inspiring, that is contagious, and that's what makes a difference. But we need to have a chance to do that, because what is anger? And so, I mean, there's a few different things we can do with anger and sadness, and one of them is to try to suppress it. And we know what that does. That's a formula for depression, right? Anger, unexpressed, is turned inward. It becomes depression. We see it all around us. But then expressing that anger, and sometimes even a sadness, can be very difficult and devastating too if there's no mediating force, no way or understanding or wisdom around it. And that's where spirituality becomes like a way to spin threads of our sadness and our anger into something that's gold, like agape love of all people. And you know, that kind of love, it's fearless love. And fearless love is unstoppable love. And that's why we see that even these people who I've mentioned before and held up, even though some of them are gone, their legacy still continues. Like Jesus still continues, Martin Luther King still continues, Gandhi's legacy still continues. Mandela's legacy will continue. Bishop Tutu's legacy. That people's legacies continue, and ours can too if we remember what our lives are about. So I guess it boils down to this. You can throw your lot in with those who think that life is simply random and morally neutral with no greater significance than what you give it. Or you can choose to trust the wisdom of the sages and the saints who tell us that life has meaning and that everyone has purpose. And if you decide that you want to follow the inspiration of the sages, then familiarize yourselves with some of the maps and some of the rules of the road, and make sure that the path that you're on is a good one. We're offering you a 5-fold path for 2012. We're going to be on it with you. We're going to join together to make a difference in the world around us this year. And I hope you'll join us. And I hope you'll take it seriously. And I hope you'll have a lot of fun while we do it together. My deepest conviction is that if you do open up to this journey with us on the 5-fold path, that your life will be filled with deep joy. Certainly pain, but a way to move that pain into something life-giving and hopeful. And your life will be richly blessed and a rich blessing to those around you. Now, if you're not sure what to put down on the line about committing to something larger than yourself, I want to just suggest that when David plays some music in just a little while, that you think about your heartbreak. Where has your heart been broken? Because in that crack is an unbelievable amount of passion to make a difference in this world. Nurture that passion. It's also your strength as well as your wound. And then develop a spiritual practice to help you to channel that passion and spin it into gold. Now, coming to church is a spiritual practice. I imagine that many times you come in to church feeling one way, and when you leave, you've changed. You feel differently. The reason is that we come in with raw emotion, and when we leave, those emotions have been shaped into religious emotions like faith and hope and love. And the greatest of these is love. May this be the most meaningful, moving, and magnificent year of your life and our lives together. In whatever number of days are still yours to claim, learn to spin the thread of love out of the straw of your life in this world and discover that your life is already surrounded with gold. I love you. Amen.